Okay, so welcome everyone. Let's bow in. And welcome to the Buddhist Path of Awakening. And we're on the last chapter of Shantideva's The Path of the Bodhisattva, chapter 10, the dedication. We thought we would read through it tonight, but Michael, do you want to lead off and do you have things to say?
I was thinking of something that would take a little bit longer. It was just a review of some points from throughout the whole book. So we
If
could
you,
do that first, or we could do it after, whichever you prefer.
let's do it first.
All right. In that case, I'm going to go back, and this should work. So first of all, welcome everyone to the class. And secondly, I have to say this is at least the fourth time that I've read this text, and every time I get something more out of it. In particular, this is the first time that I've read this text, at least sometimes, with Kunzung Palden's commentary, which was helpful in many points. But thank everybody for the opportunity to teach this class, because I think I understand this text a little better. I'm also sure that I'll be reading it more times, and again, that I'll be getting something out of it each and every time. So my thought in doing a review is we started reading this text weeks ago, and I just wanted to, with some speed, go through the text from the beginning with some selected quotes. It's not necessarily a comprehensive review, and each point isn't necessarily the best or the most important point. Really, the best or most important point is whatever's inspired you, whatever has given you some insight, whatever has provoked love, compassion, and understanding. But still, some of these verses, I think, are worth contemplating and reading through again. So from the first chapter, which was titled The Excellence of Bodhicitta, wanted to read through verses 9 through 12, where he begins to extol really very poetically about the power of bodhicitta and its transformative potential. So I don't know if people want to volunteer to read and could raise your hand, and then Barry, if you could call on people.
Sure.
Okay, and I see that Mark raised his hand, so maybe we can start with Mark while other people raise hands. If you could just start with verse 9.
Okay.
And this is again from the first chapter.
Should bodhicitta come to birth in those who suffer, chained in prisons of samsara, in that instant they are called the children of the blissful one, revered by all the world, by gods and humankind, from like the supreme substance of the alchemist. It takes out our impure flesh and makes of it the body of the Buddha, the jewel beyond all price. Such is bodhicitta. Let us grasp it firmly. Since the boundless wisdom of the only guide of beings perfectly examined and perceived its priceless worth, those who wish to leave this state of wandering should hold well to this precious bodhicitta. All other virtues, like the plantain tree, produce their fruit, but then their force is spent. Alone, the marvelous tree of bodhicitta, constantly bearing fruit and growing unceasingly.
So beginning with verse 9, he talks about the power of bodhicitta to transform really anyone, all those who suffer in samsara, chained in prisons of samsara, and that the instant we begin to realize bodhicitta that's inherent in us, that we become children of the Blessed One. And then from there, he begins giving examples of, again, just the real power of bodhicitta, the real power of awakened mind, the real power of love and compassion to transform. And the first example is like alchemist who transformed an impure substance into something precious. And then in the next verse, actually he's talking about the Buddha as a guide who can bring us to the jewel of priceless worth. And then bodhicitta, unlike other virtues that produce their fruit, but their force is spent, how bodhicitta is inexhaustible and bears fruit and grows unceasingly. And then there are further examples that he gives as well. But the main point of this chapter, again, is right in the title, The Excellence of Bodhicitta. And as we read through this text, perhaps more and more we come to appreciate how truly excellent the power, the beauty of awakened mind really is. In the second chapter, let's see if this works. Second chapter is titled Confession, but really, as we talked about, it really what is does in this chapter, and even a little bit of the third chapter as well, is the sevenfold service, which is a traditional Mahayana service of prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing in the merit of all beings, requesting Buddhas to teach, asking teachers to remain and continue to teach, and then finally dedicating the merit that we earn through our practice. And the idea of each one of these, each aspect of the sevenfold service, like many other things in the Mahayana, is a remedy for the ego mind. That, for instance, prostrating involves letting go of arrogance. Offering is letting go of attachment, miserliness, and greed. And each one works in some way with one of the kleshas. In this verse, I actually wanted to read verses 36 through 39 because he begins here to introduce the idea of emptiness, as well as talking about impermanence and the illusory nature, and the reality that karma follows us like a shadow. So in this sense, it involves some of the same thinking as what goes into the four reminders: the precious human birth, the reality of impermanence and death, the reality of karma, and then finally the unsatisfactoriness of samsara. So actually the top of the page, beginning with all that I possess, is verse 36. And if someone could read verses 36 through 39.
Trip.
All that I possess and use is like the fleeting vision of a dream. It fades into the realms of memory, and fading will be seen no more. And even in the brief course of this present life, so many friends and foes have passed away, because of whom the evils I have done still lie unbearable before me. The thought came never to my mind that I too am a brief and passing thing, and so, through hatred, lust, and ignorance, I have committed many sins. Never halting night or day, my life drains constantly away. And from no other source does increase come. How can there not be death for such as me?
So again, even yesterday now seems like a dream to us. And so how true the illusory nature of things really is if we just stop to contemplate the reality of existence. And again, as he says, even in this brief course of this present life, we've seen other people pass away. And so we know that their impermanence is a reality. We know that death is a reality. And yet, again, he talks about karma and evil deeds and the need to really work ourselves free of them. Again, these verses are part of his confession and again, just letting go of attachment to ego goals, the kleshas, and the poisons of passion, aggression, and ignorance. So that was the confession piece. The next chapter is taking hold of bodhicitta. And here I'd like to read verses 10 through 12.
Philip.
For sentient beings, poor and destitute, may I become a treasure ever plentiful, and lie before them, closely in their reach, a varied source of all that they might need. My body thus, and all my goods besides, and all my merits gained and to be gained, I give them all, and do not count the cost, to bring about the benefit of beings. Nirvana is attained by giving all. Nirvana is the object of my striving, and all must be surrendered in a single instant. Therefore, it is best to give it all to others.
So he'll actually say more about the practice of generosity later, but in these verses, and actually throughout this chapter, he talks about the power of generosity, of letting go of self-cherishing, letting go of putting oneself first at all times, and actually being open to other people, open to the needs of other people. The verses near the end of this chapter are actually used as part of the Bodhisattva vow because they're such a beautiful expression of the willingness to do whatever would be helpful to beings, to wake beings up, to help them to realize the awakened mind. So this is the beginning. This is the beginning of developing the practice of generosity. Interestingly, in the commentary, Punzen Palden's commentary, he talks about that beginners should not surrender so totally in reality because we're not really prepared for that, and it would actually only be a parody of what's really meant to be done with the paramita of generosity. But at the same time, we should develop an attitude of generosity, an attitude of being willing to be open to others and to give to others where we can. The next chapter is carefulness. And here, if someone could read verses 26 through 31.
Steve.
For it's as if by chance that I have gained this state so hard to find, wherein to help myself. If now, while having such discernment, I am once again consigned to hell, I am as if benumbed by sorcery, as if reduced to total mindlessness. I do not know what dulls my wits. Oh, what is it that has me in its grip? Anger, lust, these enemies of mine are limbless and devoid of faculties. They have no bravery, no cleverness. How then have they reduced me to such slavery? They dwell within my mind and at their pleasure injure me. All this I suffer meekly, unresenting. Thus my abject patience all displaced. If all the gods and demigods besides together came against me as my foes, they would be powerless to throw me down to fires of hell of unrelenting pain. And yet the mighty fiend of my afflictions flings me in an instant headlong down to where the mighty Lord of mountains would be burned, its very ashes all consumed.
So with these verses, and actually in this chapter in its totality, Shantideva in a way brings us back to chapter 1, where he talks about the brief glimpses of bodhicitta we have as being like a flash of lightning in the middle of a dark, dark night that just for a moment illuminates everything. And that we have these experiences, but our experience of bodhicitta is weak because we're so habituated and so caught up in the kleshas. And this is what he's describing here. It's as if, in verse 26, for as if by chance that I have gained this state so hard to find, wherein to help myself, we begin to realize that it's actually possible to wake up. It's actually possible to transform ourselves in the way that he talks about in the first chapter. And yet we forget this. We get caught up, we get lost, we get distracted, we get absorbed, as if benumbed by sorcery, as if reduced to total mindlessness. And he says, what is it that has me in its grip? And he begins talking about passion, aggression, and ignorance, and how in one sense they have no power, and yet at the same time, because they dwell within our mind and at their pleasure injure us, we give in to them, we get lost in them. And with this, they bring tremendous harm to us and harm to other beings as well. Again, this chapter was titled Carefulness. The next chapter was Vigilant Introspection. In this chapter, carefulness along with vigilant introspection really talk about the paramita of discipline. So we'll go to that and read verses 1 through 3 to begin with.
Sarah.
Those who wish to keep the trainings must with perfect self-possession guard their minds. Without this guard upon the mind, the trainings cannot be preserved. Wandering where it will, the elephant of mind will bring us down to the torment in the hell of unrelenting pain. No worldly beast, however wild and crazed, could bring upon us such calamities. If, with mindfulness as rope, the elephant of mind is tethered all around, our fears will come to nothing, every virtue drop into our hands.
So with these verses, he talks about the contrast between in our experience, and that we can see quite directly in meditation practice, the difference between untamed mind, wild mind, and the mind that we come to recognize and develop through meditation practice, where with mindfulness rope, the elephant of mind is tethered all around. He'll go on to say that whatever external worldly things there are that might bring us harm, none of them can do harm to us in the way that an untamed mind can. And also we'll be making the point that all harm ultimately comes from the mind. All harm ultimately comes from the undisciplined mind. There's also some other verses that I wanted to read here. So let me see if this works. Okay, if someone could read verses 12 through 14.
Dan.
Harmful beings are everywhere, like space itself. Impossible it is that all should be suppressed. But let this angry mind alone be overthrown, and it's through all foes, and it's though all foes has been subdued. To cover all the earth with sheets of leather, where could such amounts of skin be found? But with the leather soles of just my shoes, it is though I cover all the earth. And thus the outer course of things I myself cannot restrain, but let me just restrain my mind, and what is left to be restrained.
So not only does all harm come from the mind, but he makes the point that all virtue comes from the mind as well. And it also makes a really a critically important point here, that we could work forever to try to stage manage and control the world around us. And yet still there's suffering, irritation, and pain. But if we're able to work with our mind, it's just as if the metaphor that he uses is just the leather of shoes protects us from all the irritations of the earth. So again, really emphasizing the importance of meditation practice, and as well as study and contemplation in developing vigilant introspection and in being able to tame the mind. Could read verses 28 and 29.
Judith.
Yes. 28 and 29.
Yep.
Defilements are a band of robbers looking for their chance to injure us. They steal our virtue when their moment comes and batter out the lives of happy destinies. Therefore, from the gateway of my mind, my mindfulness shall not have leave to stray, and if it wanders, it shall be recalled by thoughts of anguish in the lower worlds.
So again and again we come back, because again and again we realize that defilements, passion, aggression, ignorance, ego clinging, are like a band of robbers looking for their chance to injure us. And then finally, to conclude this chapter, just verse 34.
Mark.
If at the outset, when I check my mind, I find that it is tainted with some fault, I shall be still and self-possessed, unmoving, like a piece of wood.
So again, this is one of the ways that he recommends that we work with our mind, that when we recognize that anger, lust, whatever, powerful klesha has begun to affect our thinking, affect our perceptions, affect our behavior, that when we catch ourselves in that way, that we'd be still and self-possessed, unmoving like a piece of wood. And again, in going through these chapters, if I were to go through every point that he makes, we'd be here all night. Just trying to remind of some of the main points that he brings up. There are actually a lot of different remedies and ways of working with mind and working with the kleshas that come up in the different chapters.
Oh, wow. But I wanted to take more meat off. Okay.
So, right, we're going to go to the next chapter, which is the third paramita, patience. And just read verses 1 and 2.
That would be Trip.
All the good works gathered in 1,000 ages, such as deeds of generosity and offerings to the blissful ones, a single flash of anger shatters them. No evil is there similar to anger, no austerity to be compared with patience. Steep yourself, therefore, in patience, in various ways, insistently.
So with this chapter, Shantideva really digs into the nature of aggression and the ways in which, through the development of patience and through meditation practice, we can overcome aggression. And in particular, makes it very clear that aggression in particular, in regard to the Mahayana, is particularly damaging because it's so contrary to the idea of working for the benefit of sentient beings, where even the state of mind where we wish others harm is contradictory to what we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to develop through the Mahayana teachings. I wanted to read one other piece from this chapter. So yes, if someone could read verses 22 through 31.
Steve.
I am not angry with my bile and other humors, fertile source of suffering and pain. So why should living beings give offense? They likewise are impelled to circumstance. Although they are unlooked for, undesired, these ills afflict us all the same. And likewise, though unwanted and unsought, defilements nonetheless insistently arise. Never thinking, now I will be angry, people are impulsively caught up in anger. Irritation likewise comes, though never plans to be experienced. All defilements of whatever kind, the whole variety of evil deeds are brought about by circumstances. None is independent, none autonomous. Conditions, once assembled, have no thought that they will now give rise to some result, nor does that which is engendered think that it has been produced. The primal substance, as they say, and that which has been called the self, do not arise designedly. I do not think, I will become. For that which is not born does not exist. So what could want to come to be? And permanently drawn toward its object, it can never cease from being so. Indeed, this self, if permanent, is certainly inert like space itself. And should it meet with other factors, how could they affect it since it is unchanging? If, when conditions act on it, it stays just as it was before, what influence have these conditions had? They say that these are agents of the self, but what connection could there be between them? All things then depend on other things, and these likewise depend. They are not independent. Knowing this, we will not be annoyed. All things that are like magical appearances.
Okay, so throughout this chapter on patience, Shantideva presents different ways of looking at situations besides the conventional ways that we look at things that support becoming angry and aggressive. And in these particular verses, he's actually expressing the view of emptiness, shunyata, that we talked about last week and the week before, that's presented in chapter 9. But here he's saying that basically one reason that we get angry is because we attribute deliberation to people who are really caught up in circumstances. And what he's pointing out is that causes and conditions really have no thought to become something. It's just when the right conditions come together, things manifest. And that's really what he's talking about throughout these verses. And in verse 31, finally, when he says, all things then depend on other things, and these likewise depend, they're not independent. He is very similarly talking about the same thing that we talked about last week in chapter 9, that things don't have inherent substance, but come together as a result of causes and conditions, cause and effect. And for that reason, why would we be annoyed at things that are like magical appearances? It's because we take them as real and remain unaware of the reality of cause and effect, causes and conditions, that we solidify situations and become angry at them. It's a powerful thing to contemplate, I think. Want to jump ahead to verses 16 through 19. This is a chapter on diligence, or what Trungpa Rinpoche calls the paramita of exertion. And if someone could read verses 16 through 19.
Sarah.
Do not be downcast, but marshal all your powers. Make an effort. Be the master of yourself. Practice the equality of self and other. Practice the exchange of self and other. Oh, but how could I become enlightened? Don't excuse yourself with such despondency. The Buddha, who declares the truth, has truly spoken and proclaimed. But if they bring forth strength of perseverance, even bees and flies and gnats and grubs will gain supreme enlightenment so hard to find. And if by birth, the lineage of humankind, I am able to distinguish good from ill, and do not leave aside the Bodhisattva deeds, why should I not attain the state of Buddhahood? That I must give my life and limbs alarms and frightens me. If so you say, your terror is misplaced, confused. You fail to see what's hard and what is easy.
So in these verses, Shantideva is reminding us, exhorting us not to give in to self-doubt, not to give in to laziness, distraction, but to truly realize that, just as the Buddha said, that even insignificant minor beings, if they bring forth the strength of perseverance, if they exert themselves, that will gain enlightenment. So it's even more so for us who are able to distinguish good from ill. We're able to refrain from negative actions. We're able to develop ourselves through practice, study, and contemplation. And so we are able to attain Buddhahood. Someone could read verse 55.
Philip.
I will be victor over all, and nothing shall prevail and bring me down. The offspring of the lion, the conqueror, should constantly abide in this self-confidence.
In this part of the chapter on exertion or diligence, he talks about the positive pride, positive confidence that we are able to work with ourselves, that we have precious human birth, we have the opportunity to study and practice, we have the conditions to study and practice, and that for that reason we could take a kind of positive pride. In the other verses, he talks about negative pride or arrogance and how destructive that is, but that this is different, that we could abide in this self-confidence, as he says. The next chapter was meditative concentration, which corresponds to the paramita of meditation. And if you could just read verses 2 through 4.
Mark.
In solitude, the mind and the body are not troubled by distraction. Therefore, leave this worldly life and totally abandon mental wandering. Because of loved ones and desire for gain, we fail to turn away from worldly things. These, then, are the first things to renounce. The prudent should conduct themselves like this. Penetrative insight joined with calm abiding utterly eradicates afflicted states. Knowing this, first search for calm abiding, found by people who are happy to be free from worldly ties.
So again, in this chapter on meditation, the power meet of meditation, meditative concentration, he talks about the importance of solitude, letting go of worldly concerns, worldly preoccupations, and really developing penetrative insight, which is vipassana joined with calm abiding, and points out that first we search for calm abiding or shamatha practice in order to settle the mind. And then when the mind is settled, its natural knowing, clarity comes forth. And he talks about the helpfulness of solitude to do this. Solitude, of course, could be months, 3-year retreats, really, but it could also just be the amount, whatever amount of time we choose to engage in meditation practice, that we actually are able to let go of worldly concerns, worldly pursuits for however long that is, 10 minutes, a half hour, an hour. But just again, pointing out the importance of working through desire and attachment and absorption in worldly pursuits was a big part of this chapter. Someone could read verses 129 and 130.
Trip.
All the joy the world contains has come through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself. Is there need for lengthy explanation? Childish beings look out for themselves. Buddhas labor for the good of others. See the difference that divides them.
This was pretty straightforward. And when the rest of the chapter, he begins to talk about how we can develop a mind that will allow us to consider other beings through the meditation on the equality of self and other and the exchange of self and other. So then we had chapter 9, which we just talked about last week. So if someone could read verses 2 through 4.
Steve.
Relative and ultimate. These, the two truths, are declared to be. The ultimate is not within the reach of intellect, for intellect is said to be the relative. In light of this, within the world, two kinds of people are observed, those with yogic insight and the common run of people. In this regard, the views of ordinary folk are undermined by yogis who themselves are in the world. Within whose ranks the lower in degrees of insight are confuted by the higher by means of the examples that the yogis and the worldly both accept. And for the sake of the result, analysis is left aside.
Sorry, I actually meant just to read verse 2. I misread my notes, but thank you for that. Relative and ultimate, and we talked about that last week, that there are actually within different schools of Buddhist philosophy, different ideas about what's relative and ultimate. But the basic idea is relative is things as they appear, and ultimate is things as they are. And I think it's also important to keep in mind the two lines: the ultimate is not within reach of intellect, for intellect is said to be the relative. That any labels, any words, any conceptual understanding might point us in the right direction, but it's at best a partial truth. And then he talks about, a little later in this, how we can actually come to develop an aptitude for emptiness. So someone could read verses 32 through 34.
Dan.
By training in this aptitude for emptiness, the habit to perceive real things will be relinquished. By training in the thought, there isn't anything, this view itself will also be abandoned. There is nothing when this is asserted, no thing is there to be examined. How can a nothing, wholly unsupported, rest before the mind as something present? When something and its non-existence both are absent from before the mind, no other option does the latter have. It comes to perfect rest from concept free.
So basically, what we're talking about here is working through meditation, through contemplation or reflection, and through study, contemplation, and meditation to develop an aptitude for emptiness. The habit to perceive real things is a habit that we've developed certainly through this lifetime, and if I'm willing to accept rebirth as a reality, through many lifetimes. And so we begin by training in the thought there isn't anything. But this also needs to be abandoned because the view that there's nothing, which is just a conceptual negation of what we thought was real to begin with, is also not the point. So then we're left with verse 34. When both something and its non-existence both are absent from before the mind, no option does the latter have. The mind comes to perfect rest from concepts free. And with this verse, he's talking about really letting go of any concept, any reference point that gets in the way of seeing reality, and just being totally open. And again, it was with this verse that he began to, it said, rise up in the air. So that's the end of what I thought we would do as a review. We can actually begin looking at the dedication. John, did you have an idea of how you wanted to divide these verses up?
I couldn't understand what you said, Michael.
I was wondering if you just wanted to begin reading and have people maybe read like a few verses at a time, or did you have a sense of how you wanted to divide
just read through this, and yeah.
All right. Maybe we can have people read verses. Let me see, 1 through 6. Does anyone want to begin?
How about Judith?
Okay. By all the virtue I have now amassed, by composition of this book, which speaks of entry to the Bodhisattva way, may every being tread the path to Buddhahood. May beings everywhere who suffer torment in their minds and bodies have, by virtue of my merit, joy and happiness in boundless measure. As long as they may linger in samsara, may their joy be undiminished. May they taste of unsurpassed beatitude in constant and unbroken continuity. Throughout the spheres and reaches of the world, in hellish states as many as there are, may beings who abide there taste the bliss and peace of Sukhavati. May those caught in the freezing ice be warmed, and from great clouds of bodhisattvas torrents rain in boundless streams to cool those burning in infernal fires. May forests where the leaves are blades and swords become sweet groves and pleasant woodland glades, and may the trees of miracles appear, supplanting those upon the hill of Shalmali.
Would someone like to read the next set of verses?
Philip.
And may the very pits of hell be sweet with fragrant pools, all perfumed with the scent of lotuses, and lovely with the cries of swan and goose and waterfowl, so pleasing to the ear. May fiery coals turn into heaps of jewels, the burning ground become an even crystal floor. May crushing hills become sublime abodes, offering temples, dwellings of the Buddhas. May the hail of weapons, lava, fiery stones become henceforth a rain of flowers, and all the mutual woundings with sharp blades be now a rain of flowers thrown in play. And those engulfed in fiery Vaitarani, their flesh destroyed, their bones bleached white as kunda flowers, may they, through all my merit's strength, have godlike forms and sport with goddesses in Mandakini's peaceful streams.
Thank you. Someone like to do the next set?
Sarah.
What fear is it, they'll ask, that grips the henchmen of the deadly, the frightful vultures and the carrion crows? What noble strength is it that brings us joy and drives away our dreadful night? And looking skyward, they will see the shining form of Vajrapani. Then may their sins be quenched in joy, and may they go to him. And when they see the seething lava flood of hell, extinguished in a rain of blossoms, drenched in fragrant streams, at once fulfilled in bliss, they'll ask, how can this be? May then the denizens of hell behold the one who holds the lotus. Friends, throw away your fears and quickly gather here. For who is it who comes to us to banish dread? This gleaming youth with bound up hair, this loving Bodhisattva, saving and protecting every being, whose power relieves all pain, bestowing joy. Behold the 100 gods who lay their crowns before his lotus feet, the rain of flowers that falls upon his head, his eyes moist with compassion, the splendor of his house that echoes praises of 1,000 goddesses. May those in hell thus cry on seeing Manju Gosha.
Okay.
And likewise, through my roots of virtue, seeing bodhisattvas like Samantabhadra free from stain, those clouds of bliss all laden with a cooling, scented rain, may all those languishing in hell come now to perfect joy. And may the stooping animals be freed from fear of being preyed upon, each other's food. And may the famished spirits have such joy as those who dwell within the northern continent. And may they be replete and satisfied by streams of milk that pour from noble Lord Avalokita's hand, and bathing in it, may they be refreshed and cooled.
Would someone else like to read?
How about Ed?
And may the blind receive their sight, and may the deaf begin to hear, and women near their time bring forth, like Maya Devi, free from all travail. And may the naked now be clothed, and all the hungry eat their fill. And may those parched with thirst receive pure waters and delicious drink. May the poor and destitute find wealth, the haggard and the careworn joy. May those now in despair be whole in mind, endowed with sterling constancy. May every being ailing with disease be freed at once from every malady. May every sickness that afflicts the living be wholly and forever absent from the world. May those who go in dread have no more fear. May captives be unchained and now set free. And may the weak receive their strength. May living beings help each other in kindness. May travelers upon the road find happiness no matter where they go. And may they gain, without the need of toil, the goals on which they set their hearts. May those who put to sea in boat or ship attain the ports that they desire, and may they safely come to shore and sweet reunion with their kith and kin.
Would someone else like to read?
Ginny.
May those who lose their way and wander in a wild find fellow travelers, and safe from threat of thieves and savage beasts. May they be tireless and their journey light. May children and the aged, and all those without protection, wandering in the fearful, pathless ways, will fall asleep unconscious of their peril, pure celestial beings as their guardians. May all be freed from states of bondage. May they be possessed of wisdom, faith, and love. With perfect sustenance and conduct, may they always have remembrance of their former lives. May everyone have unrestricted wealth, just like the treasury of space, enjoying it according to their wish, without a trace of harm or enmity. May beings destitute of splendor be magnificent and bright, and those who suffer from deformity acquire great beauty and perfection. May all the women of the world attain the strength of masculinity, and may the lowly come to excellence. The proud and haughty lose their arrogance. And thus, by all the merit I have gained, may every being, leaving none aside, abandon all their evil ways, embracing goodness now and evermore.
Someone else like to read?
How about Mark?
From bodhicitta, may they never separate and constantly engage in bodhisattva actions, and may they accept as disciples by the Buddhas. Accepted, drawing back from what is demons' work. And may these beings, each and every one, enjoy an unsurpassed longevity, living always in contentment. May the very name of death be strange to them. In all the 10 directions and on every side, may groves of wish-fulfilling trees abound, resounding with sweetness of the teachings spoken by the Buddhas and their bodhisattvas, heirs. And may the earth be wholesome everywhere, free from boulders, cliffs, and chasms, flat and even like level palm, and smooth like lapis lazuli. For many circles of disciplines, may multitudes of bodhisattvas live in every land, adorning them with every excellence.
Someone else like to read?
How about Philip?
From birdsong and the sighing of the trees, from shafts of light and from the sky itself, may living beings, each and every one, perceive the constant sound of Dharma. And always may they come into the presence of the Buddhas and meet with bodhisattvas, offspring of the same, with clouds of offerings unbounded. May the teachers of the world be worshipped. May kindly spirits bring the rains on time for harvests to be rich and plentiful. May princes rule according to the Dharma. May the world be blessed with all prosperity. May medicines be full of strength. May secret words of power be chanted with success. May spirits of the air that feed on flesh be kind, their minds imbued with pity. May beings never suffer anguish. Let them not be sick nor evilly behave. May they have no fear nor suffer insults. Always may their minds be free from sorrow. In monasteries, temples, and the like, may reading and reciting widely flourish. May harmony prevail among the Sangha. May its purposes be all fulfilled.
Someone else like to read?
Sarah.
May ordained monks, attent upon the practice, find perfect places for retreat and solitude, abandon every vagrant thought, and meditate with trained and serviceable minds. May nuns have all their wants supplied. May quarreling and spite be strange to them. Let all who have embraced monastic life uphold a pure and unimpaired observance. May those who break their discipline repent, and always may they strive to cleanse away their faults, and thus may they acquire a fortunate rebirth wherein to practice stainless discipline. May wise and learned beings be revered and always be sustained by alms. May they be pure in mind, and may their fame spread far and wide. May beings never languish in the lower realms. May pain and hardship be unknown to them. With bodies greater than the gods, may they attain enlightenment without delay. May beings time and time again make offerings to all the Buddhas, and with the Buddha's unimagined bliss, may they enjoy undimmed and constant happiness.
Someone else like to read?
Judith. Oh, you have to unmute, Judy.
May all the Bodhisattvas now fulfill their high intention for the sake of wanderers. May sentient beings now obtain all that their guardians wish for them. And may the hearers and the Pratyeka Buddhas gain their perfect happiness, until through Manjughosha's perfect kindness, I attain the ground of perfect joy. May I remember all my lives and enter into the monastic state. Thus may I abide, sustained by simple, ordinary fare, and in every life obtain a dwelling place in perfect solitude. Whenever I desire to gaze on him or put to him the slightest question, may I behold with unobstructed sight my own protector, Manjughosha. To satisfy the needs of beings dwelling in the 10 directions to the margins of the sky, may I reflect in all my deeds the perfect exploits of Manjushri.
Someone else?
Yeah,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's
Or
fine.
someone else would like to read.
Well, Philip.
And now, as long as space endures, as long as there are beings to be found, may I continue likewise to remain, to drive away the sorrows of the world. The pains and sorrows of all wandering beings, may they ripen wholly on myself, and may the virtuous company of bodhisattvas always bring about the happiness of beings. May the doctrine, only cure for sorrow, source of every bliss and happiness, be blessed with wealth, upheld with veneration, and throughout a vast continuance of time endure. And now to Manjughosha I prostrate, whose kindness is the wellspring of my good intent, and to my virtuous friends I also bow, whose inspirations gave me strength to grow.
This completes the Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, the Way of the Bodhisattva, which was composed by the master Shantideva. The text was translated, edited, and finalized in Tibetan on the basis of a manuscript from Kashmir by the Indian scholar Shantideva and the monk translator and editor Kawa Pulsek. At a later time, this version was revised and finalized in accordance with the version from Magadha, together with its commentary by the Indian scholar Dharma Sri Bhadra and the Tibetan monks, translators, and editors Rinchen Zangpo and Shakya Lodro. Still later, it was revised and finalized by the Indian scholar Sumat Kirti and the monk translator and editor Lodin Sherab. And with that, we conclude the Bodhicharya Avatara, the Way of the Bodhisattva.
I'm just going to read one passage from Kunzang Pelden's book, The Nectar of Manjushri's Speech, because it prefigures maybe where we're going to be going. He says at the end of his commentary, therefore, in response to this wealth of excellent and favorable circumstances, And because of the great interest shown, and on account of these repeated requests, I wrote this commentary, basing myself on the teachings of the third incarnation of Palge Lama, the Lord of the entire doctrine of Shakyamuni, and the very embodiment of Manjushri, Organ Jigme Chuki Wanpo, who is Patrul Rinpoche, the white banner of whose renown is raised aloft above the three worlds of existence. When I had the marvelous opportunity to receive from the omniscient Lord, Patrul Rinpoche, himself, a detailed exposition of the Bodhicharya Avatara, which he gave in the course of a 6-month teaching at his seat at Chokhur Gegon, the Dharma encampment called Rigzin Chime Druppa Shedrup Gyatso, I gladly undertook the task of writing notes in the periods before the teaching sessions. In addition, I also made notes during an explanation of the Bodhicharya Avatara given in a detailed 40-day course by Patrul Rinpoche's heart son, Nunpo Rinpoche, Organ Tenzin Norbu, a teaching that I had the good fortune to receive twice. It is on the basis of these notes of mine, and thanks also to notes made by other close disciples of Patrul Rinpoche, and to their spoken explanations, that I, the ignorant and foolish Kunzang Chodruk, also known as Kunzang Pelden, the mere pretense of a monk of Shakyamuni, wrote this commentary with a perfectly pure attitude and with a view to ease and comprehension. May virtue and well-being result. Mangalam, which means blessings. So I think in the future we're going to be reading Patrul Rinpoche, who inspired this wonderful commentary to Bodhicharya Avatara, who taught Bodhicharya Avatara over 100 times for months at a time. So we'll perhaps go through his classic work at some point here soon. The words of my perfect teacher. Beautiful stuff. This is really, isn't it just it's like a map to living, how to live a good life. Well, comments, questions? We still have a little bit of time. Thank you, Michael, for that wonderful review. I'm getting a request to share why I was inspired. Because these teachings are transformative. Because they are showing us the way to transform our lives and our world, which go together. When one transforms one transforms the other. And it's really beautifully presented. Now Valerie's asking me, last night we had a Sukhavati for a very devoted, that's a funeral service, for a very devoted student of Chogyam Trungpa. His name was Tanya Leontov, although she was known to us for years as Kason. And she passed a couple of days ago. And we were invited to stand up and say something. I stood up and read this famous verse from the end of Bodhicharya Avatara, Shantideva's work. And now, as long as space endures, as long as there are beings to be found, may I continue likewise to remain, to drive away the sorrows of the world. And this is what we're being enjoined to do, both for the sake of others, but also it's the way to live as a Bodhisattva and ultimately as a Buddha. It's really the heart of the teaching. You can look at that second, it's verse 53 in chapter 10. And now, as long as space endures, it's really beautiful.
Ed has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it dawned on me as we were doing this tonight, perhaps more forcefully than it has in the past, that this is poetry. This then, and we approach it as, if you will, philosophy or thought, but its power and its genius is really in the use of words and the use of rhythm to convey, kind of like acting, if you will, and that's a different dimension from, I think, what we're used to when we read Dharma books, and I'd submit is part of the genius of the work.
I couldn't agree more.
Me too. Absolutely. It's song from the heart. Beautiful. It's moving.
It's also interesting to think that this text was written some, 1,500 years ago, something like that. And how relevant in that dedication, how relevant it is to today.
Amazing, isn't it? It's so relevant today. It speaks to us. Asking us to become such wonderful human beings. And a help to the world. Philip has his hand raised.
So thank you both, as always. So this is from Meditative Concentration, verse 129. I'd like to read it once more. All the joy the world contains has come through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself.
Wow.
Karen Sue.
Oh, wow. I'm not sure I can get through this. That this experience with all of you has been quite special. And I just want to convey my gratitude to everyone. But I keep thinking, whose idea was this to do this? And whosever it was, I just want to say thank you. And I, like so much of my study, though the book is finished, I'm beginning again. And it's such a wonderful feeling for me. So I thank you.
I might just jump in. I just really want to express my thanks to Michael and John for going through this wonderful book. When Michael was doing a review, I just, found out again and again how many gems there are in this book. And like, I feel like if I really assimilate the meaning of every word, every verse, I wouldn't have, yeah, I would have such much deeper understanding of what being a bodhisattva really means. And I feel I'll be much more fearless in how I see what I see now as challenges in my life, and including at death. So thank you.
You know, what I'm hearing here is something that I experienced at a certain point, which is gratitude. You know, it just really, at some point, sinks in the beauty and value and vastness of these teachings. And you can't help but just feeling great gratitude. Gratitude to John and Michael, to Trungpa Rinpoche, to the lineage, to the Dharma, and to all my fellow Sangha members. I feel that gratitude.
Love and friendship and gratitude. Yeah. Shall we end? Anybody have anything they'd like to say? Judy.
It just sweeps you away to a higher plane. The poetry and the imagery, it's just otherworldly when you think of what's going on down here. It's a vision that we don't come in contact with. At least I don't come in contact with on a daily basis. And it's there. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of this.
Ed.
Yeah, I almost hesitate to break the spell because it's it's so wonderful. But I kind of have been thinking about this is almost, if you will, evidence of the truth of karma. Why have we been fortunate enough to come to this, to be here, to be in a land where the Dharma is available and taught, and we just think of so many other places in the world where this is not available, and perhaps there is some truth to, and again, speaking from a Western perspective, of the continuity through eons, which the teachings kind of take for granted, but as I said, from our perspective, it's new ground to deal with.
Well said.
This is something I've shared often, but I'm going to share it again because Ed just reminded me of it, and I'm just feeling the wonder of it right now, in terms of karma, that everything I have done, every little microsecond of everything I have done in my life has led me right here, right now. And it's a wonder, just one of the wonders. And when you when you read verse 55, I was thinking of it right before because I'm doing another online workshop with Pema Chodron. It's like once a month, once every 2 months. It's called The Year with Pema, and she begins. And I've noticed this before, but she begins every teaching, you know, particularly those related directly to the book, but just in general, it's all related directly to this book. But with that verse, and now as long as space endures, and she goes through those 4 lines to open, and sometimes to open and close every teaching she does.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody. Thank you. Thanks for doing everything you did in your life to bring you right here, right now.
Yeah.
Chris.
Hey, sorry. Yeah, I'm super shy, but I want to say thank you too. It was amazing. Very instructing and very good instruction. I've learned a lot. I know started listening to the commentary by Pema Chodron as well, and then the book showed up at my work. I worked for a thrift store, a nonprofit, and it showed up. I was like, that's amazing. And it started some really good dialogues with my son. Had it listening when I have to commute back and forth to work. And I think that was a really good way to introduce him to some of the ideas and the concepts. And it's been extremely, extremely helpful. So I just want to say thank you. And I appreciated the opportunity for this. So thank you.
Well, shall we say the closing chants? See if I can get them up on the screen. Here we go again.
You can do it.
Yeah. Here we go. Who's leading?
I believe I am. So we'll close by saying a prayer for peace and dedicating the merit earned by our practice for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Hold on a second. I'm going to mute everybody. Trip, unmute yourself, please.
Okay. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, John. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, John. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Blessing.
Have a good night.
Good night, Trip.
Hey, I'm heading out for 2 weeks. I head out for Indonesia tomorrow.
Woo!
So I
Teach
will.
retreat.
Pardon me?
What did you say?
I leave for Indonesia tomorrow, God willing,
Oh my
and
God.
I should be at Borobudur on Sunday. I will try to do some pictures, and then we go meet with coffee partners. But I will try to chime in. But wanted to let you guys know.
Wow.
I will be
Safe
taking you
travels.
with me. Yeah, thank you. And this was a powerful night, so thank you. Really wonderful. Really, I'm very grateful.
Me too.
So I'll check in.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Did
Thank
Safe
you.
travels.
Thank you.
you get a recording, John?
They're just still recording.
It's still recording. Yeah.
Okay. Well,